And thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. Indeed, today we are looking back on what happened sometime last week when the Sputnik V Probe Report was laid before Parliament finally for consideration. And the House adopted it and approved the report. But there are huge, significant questions still to ask about that particular document. It has been, in and out of Parliament for a while. There's a lot of controversy about it. But we finally got some clarity on what the committee found. But the gap there is that the committee said very little about consequences for the sector minister. And why am I asking that question? Let's get into it. Let's get into what the committee found exactly that begs that fundamental question. And as you know, the minority, on the back of that report that was laid before Parliament, is asking and demanding for the minister's head. Now, we know that that committee was put together in the midst of the COVID crisis. Of course, the health minister had attempted to get the Sputnik V vaccines from Russia. As we got to know later, the challenge was that Ghana, as a state, still couldn't get the vaccines from another state, as in Russia, and they resorted then to using a middleman in the UAE, among the UAE royal family, Sheikh Ahmed Dalmouk Al Maktoum, and the private company to get the vaccines in, which then threw up a whole host of controversial questions, right? And so the 9-member ad hoc committee was then established. It was a bipartisan committee in Parliament to look into the circumstances surrounding the purchase of the vaccines. And the vaccines, we bought it far more expensive than what was advertised and what the market price of the vaccines were. So that's what the committee went into it to establish. Now, when the committee went into it, they found these. The first thing they found was that there was procurement constituted an internal agreement and required parliamentary approval as required by the Constitution. In other words, the process that the minister used to procure the vaccines breached constitutional provisions, which required that it had to go through parliamentary approval. And then secondly, the Ministry of Health did not also seek approval from the board of the PPA, that is the Public Procurement Authority, for the purchase and the procurement of the vaccine. So fundamental constitutional breaches that the parliamentary committee indeed found. That's not all, by the way. The committee, again, also established that the amount of $19 was the agreed price for the dose of the vaccine under the ministry's agreement with Al Maktoum. The problem with this is that we know now that, on the world market, Russia itself that produces dollars. That's something that we know. But the ministry, of course, the parliamentary committee had to now make the finding of fact, right? The key question then becomes, okay, after the finding of fact, what happens? They also established that the ministry entered into 2 agreements without cabinet approval, right? So the minister, the story goes from what the committee established, and this is a bipartisan committee, so there are MPP members on the committee and there are NDC members on the committee, and all of them agreed that such a high-profile purchase in the midst of a crisis that was going to cost us a lot of money didn't go through cabinet, had no cabinet approval, and it was only based on a ministerial decision. So the minister took that decision by himself without recourse to cabinet and to the president, I guess, knowing about it. Now, the fifth thing, and this is the fundamentally key point that the minority sides are using as one of their key points to demand that the minister goes. The committee also found that although the minister swore under oath, right, that no money has been paid, almost 2.85 million, being half of the contract sum, had already been paid, right? They make the point about perjury here, right? But the majority side say there's no perjury because the minister actually, during the interrogation before the committee, simply said, as at the time that they were asking him, he didn't know that payments had been made because the Bank of Ghana and the Finance Ministry will have to take care of the payment arrangement, which takes time. And he hasn't followed up to know whether those payments were made or not. It turns out that payments had been made, right? But as at the time that they were asking him those questions, he didn't know for certain. That's the majority's explanation for this. And they said that can be perjury, but the minority guys make a big deal of that. We'll get into that very shortly. And so comes the minority's motion asking for a vote of censure, right? Which is, in essence, a constitutional tool for the removal of ministers appointed by the president through parliament. It's the parliamentary power to remove a minister from the executive arm of government, indeed. And the reasons are here. Transaction and international business that needed parliamentary approval, that didn't get parliamentary approval. Procurement didn't meet the PPA. It was inflated, $19 instead of the $10 as advertised. There was dishonesty there in terms of the allegations of perjury. And then there's breach of the Constitution, which I just laid out to you. So they just simply went into the committee's report and then lifted the findings and say, these are, the basis is there for the minister to be sanctioned and to be removed from office. But they have a challenge. They have a challenge to get this through, because if you read a constitutional provision, it has a numerical bar that it will have to meet if indeed this is going to carry it. Because the Parliament is said, this is Article 82, Parliament may by a resolution supported by the votes of not less than 2/3 of all members of Parliament will pass a vote of censure on a minister of state. That is to remove him. That's what it means. This vote removes the minister, but they need 2/3. Now, 2/3 comes down to the way Parliament is currently structured at 275. 2/3 of that comes down to 184, right, or more. Minimum that they will require is 184 members of Parliament. The challenge, obviously, is the minority side of Parliament only has 137 members of Parliament. So they simply do not have the numbers. If they are going to get this very high numerical bar, they will need significant number of MPP MPs to vote with them. More than 60, indeed, to vote with them. And for more indication, that will prove very difficult indeed to get. Remember that this vote of censure that they've moved is being signed by all of the minorities, 137. So it's going to come down to the numbers, right? It's going to come down to the numbers once again. The committee made recommendations, and this is where it gets fascinating. According to the committee, even if it was an emergency, the minister should have found time to communicate effectively and engage with the Committee on Health, that this would have saved the ministry from the negative reactions from the citizens. And also, they also made the recommendation that in future, any such transaction, whether local or international, be subjected to broader stakeholder consultations and be taken to due process. Other ministries, department agencies should take a cue from this recommendation, they stressed. Now, they also asked, and this is a fundamental piece of the argument that the majority side is making. They asked the Minister for Finance to take steps to recover the $2.8 million paid to the office of the Sheikh, being the cost that we pay, the upfront payment. According to the deputy majority leader in the House, Alexander Fenyo-Marke, who spoke to me last week on this, he's emphatic that already this amount has been recovered. And he says if this amount has been recovered, there is no other point, there's no other reason why the minister should be made to face the music as in removed from his position. Because that was the only fundamental issue when it comes to what we've spent. And so we're going to be looking at the justification for the minorities' demand. But there are bigger questions about accountability, right, that we need to explore. It goes beyond this. This is a real test case in many aspects, because whichever way you look at it, the committee made findings of fact, adverse findings of fact against the health minister. So the key question then becomes, what is the consequence to the minister for those breaches? Is recovering the money enough? Those are the bigger questions that will be taken on in this conversation where my guests are seated. So you want to stay with me for this after the break. Thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. Indeed, my guest is seated in the studio. He is in the person of the ranking on the Health Committee in Parliament. Mr. Kando, of course, is also a member of that committee that looked into the health minister's issues. Mr. Kando, thank you for your time here on PM Express.
Thank you very much.
Great. Also joining us right now is also on Zoom is Mariada with the Ghana Integrity Initiative, and Kwame Sedu Sapon also joining us. He's a fellow. He's a CDD fellow, and watched this process very closely when it started playing out. Now we have, well, do we have closure? I nearly said that because Parliament adopted it in the House last week. In fact, let's start from there. So what we saw last week was delayed consideration of this particular report, which you have. Parliament approved it, the report, with all the adverse findings therein. What does that mean? It's approved it, fact finding, we move on?
Okay, so let me say good evening to our cherished viewers and try to take you a bit.
By the way, forgive me, just before I start, I need to indicate that we were built to have Alexander Fanyo Marking, who is he's a chair, he was a chair of that committee, but he called with an emergency, so unable to be on the show right now. And so that's why he isn't on the show. But Mita Kando was on the committee with him. You were vice chair of the committee. Yeah. So the question again, I mean, so, okay, so what happens now?
So Parliament referred the matter to an ad hoc committee, as you have already indicated, and clearly we're giving terms of reference to consider. And so we sat in public, as you all followed the proceedings of the committee, and we started dealing with the terms of reference one after the other. After our work, we submitted our report to the House for the House to take a decision on the report. Mm-hmm. And let me state that the report was agreed on by consensus at the committee level. Mm-hmm. And again, when we came to the floor of the House, we debated it, and at the point of putting it to vote, or putting the question to vote, the second deputy speaker presided at that time, that day. And I think there was a bit of confusion.
Just before recess.
Just before recess. So we had to defer the question. And so about somewhere last week, the Right Honorable Speaker himself sat, and then he had to put the question. And again, it was also by consensus. What it means is that the content of our report has been agreed and adopted by the House. That is what it means.
Yes.
Okay. Now, to start with, let me take you through some of the terms of reference to start with. And when I was coming, I heard you raise issues of consequences of our report and what have you. To start with, this ad hoc committee is a fact-finding committee.
So only to establish all the facts.
Establish the facts.
Okay.
Because the terms of reference never included prescribing punitive measures or sanctions against anybody our fact findings or will be against. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me take you through some of the terms of reference. And the first one was to determine whether the transaction with respect to the procurement and supply of Sputnik 5 COVID-19 vaccines between the government of Republic of Ghana, represented by the Ministry of Health, and the private office of H.H. Sheikh Al-Damok Al-Maktoum and SL Global qualifies as an international business or economic transaction under Article 1815.
And as we've said in just intro, you established the fact that indeed it is.
Very good. So I'll take them one after the other, and then I'll tell you what we established.
Yeah, I mean, as for the establishment, I think we just did it. So you go through. I'll also relate to what your findings found on each, so that we can move to the substance quickly.
Okay. So, and then the second one was to determine whether the procurement process was followed and the propriety of same. That's the second one.
Again, your finding was that procurement breaches.
Fantastic. Then the third one, to determine whether the services of a middleman were procured in the transaction and if so, the propriety of same having regard to the relevant laws.
Again, you found that it was problematic to use a middleman.
No, you know, here, if we say middleman in a particular product, it is either you are dealing with a direct source, any other person
is a
middleman.
So Al Maktoum you found was a middleman. Okay.
You understand? And so the fourth one was to ascertain the cost of vaccines, the justification of the cost of vaccines, and whether the transaction guaranteed value for money for Ghana.
You found it was $19.
Fantastic.
When it's supposed to be 10.
10.
So do you find value for money?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. Because the manufacturers of Sputnik had indicated worldwide that nobody should buy a dose of Sputnik more than, in fact, they say it should, in their language, it should be less than $10 per dose.
Yeah.
In their language. So it's not as though when you are buying it directly from them, they have stated that you shouldn't buy it in the international market, you shouldn't buy it anywhere more than the $10. Okay. So the fifth one was to determine whether any consideration has passed from the government of Republic of Ghana to the middleman, the suppliers, or any other person in respect of the transaction.
In this one, I would like to articulate what you found, because there's a lot of controversy around this. Fundamentally, that question, that term of reference, did we pay money?
Yes, we did.
Have we made some commitment?
Yes, we did.
Okay, but the circumstances under which you make that finding, which is what has become
it was clear. It was clear. In fact, and let me tell you what happened at the committee level. We asked the man specific question whether or not any consideration has passed, whether or not they had paid any money, and the answer was no. I was the vice chair of the committee.
Yeah.
It was after his answer that the chairman of the committee suggested to him, was that to the best of his knowledge? Yeah. And he added that.
Yes, but Afenyo Marking, who was a chairman, makes the point last week when this came up categorically that you guys called for the tape when this became an issue, because you raised issues of perjury. And when you examined it, both sides concluded.
Called for which tape?
He appeared before you, the proceedings, yes. And you listened to it, and he makes the point.
That was a lie.
And it makes the point that the conclusion was that he didn't, when he meant was that the process that he started had not completed, including the Bank of Ghana has to pay, finance minister.
No. My disagreement with Honorable Afenyo Marking with respect to this report never included whether or not the minister said he had no knowledge of any money paid. And therefore, you can ask any of the members of the committee, we never even called for any tape or any video evidence. No, it never happened.
Yeah.
If you care to know, I mean, your people were there, they covered it, you can call the tape yourself and go through it. That's exactly what happened.
But you said that he was asked a follow-up question, which is to the best of his knowledge.
Yes.
To the best of his knowledge.
Yes. So I was just telling you what happened at the committee.
True.
That we put a question to the minister, whether or not any consideration has passed, whether they had made any commitment, whether he had paid any money. And he was categorical in his answer.
Yeah, but he qualified with the best of his knowledge.
And that's why I'm telling you that it was the chairman who came in.
Yeah.
With that suggestion
nonetheless, it's on record.
But
said to the best of his knowledge.
The circumstances must be established that it was the chairman who suggested to him that was it to the best of his knowledge, and that was more or less it was a leading question.
Okay, but the fundamental question though is that on the back of this is that Afenyo Marking maintains that when you further probed this after he had appeared before you, so the Bank of Ghana SWIFT payment, then the Finance Ministry's authorization, all of which happened post. The minister was not aware of that process. That he had just submitted and requested for the payment.
So this is what.
So he didn't know if actually payments have been made.
This is what happened. After asking the minister these questions and thereafter these answers were given, then at the committee level, when we're contemplating or deliberating on the report, then we said that no, we cannot take the minister's answer for it. If any payment has been made at all, it will come from the Ministry of Finance.
And the Bank of Ghana.
And the Bank of Ghana. And therefore, we should write, the committee should write. That is where we established that monies had been paid.
True. But it's very possible. Afenyo Marking's point is that the minister only made the request for the payment. He wouldn't have known if the payments have actually been made.
That he cannot speak for him. And that was not what he said at the committee. If that is his interpretation, that's fine. I mean, you are entitled to your views. You are entitled to your views with regards to this. But I'm telling you what happens at the committee level. He could have told us, well, as far as I'm concerned, I am not aware whether or not some money has been paid.
Yeah, but he authorized the thing that he can't tell you if it's
exactly. And exactly. So why then do you come back and tell me that he's not? And you see, you see, if you go through, I have some document to the effect that he even instructed for the letter of credit to be raised.
Yes.
You understand?
But letter of credit is letter of credit.
Of course, I know. But, you know, after raising the letter of credit, any correspondence, as a minister responsible for health, you'll be copied.
Do you have evidence that he was copied?
Yes, yes. In actual fact, I have evidence.
But was he copied in the actual final payment? That's the question.
You see, the first point is that, did he know that there was money paid or he didn't know?
He said doesn't.
He says he doesn't know.
Yeah.
And so let us not divert attentions.
Yeah.
And it has been established
that monies were paid.
That monies was.
Yeah.
In fact, the answer was not he doesn't know. The answer was that no money has been paid.
Yes. And it turns out that money has been paid.
That is a substantive issue.
Okay. So that's another reference.
Okay.
So let's go on to
So the next one was to determine whether the Honorable Minister for Health misled Parliament during the consideration of the transaction for the procurement of the vaccines. Here, you know, we have a committee responsible for health. Before this transaction was taken, the minister had appeared before the Parliamentary Select Committee on Health to defend his budget on this Sputnik issues, this COVID issues. And at that time, the minister made it clear to us that he was not going to buy any vaccine, irrespective of the source, more than $10 per dose. Do you understand? Meanwhile, before he appeared before us at the time, he had already signed that contract. So he had a knowledge of what he has done, what he had already done.
So you made this finding in your...
Yes.
Was that a finding?
Yes, it was a finding.
Because that I haven't seen, I need to verify
okay,
that.
So it's there.
It's the contest, okay.
It's there. So he lied to Parliament. And then the next
But that's an allegation that Afenyo Makin strongly rejects, that a minister lied. In fact, the word you used was perjury in your vote of censure motion.
There are two. I mean, denying that no money has been paid. And then the fact that you appeared before the Parliamentary Select Committee on Health and I can't find any other word apart from lying. Okay. Because he had already entered into that contract before appearing before us. So why didn't he tell us the realities? Do you understand? Okay. For example, let me break it down. You are going to buy this book, okay? You are going to buy this book. Now you have entered into contract for somebody to supply with this book, and then the amount has been stated in that contract already. Then after entering into that contract, you appear before a committee, ostensibly to talk about the procurement of that same book. Meanwhile, you had already entered into contract. Then you say that this book, I'm going to buy it $10 per dose. Meanwhile, you had already entered into a contract
by
$19 per one. Do you get it now? Yeah. Yes. So,
and the final one?
And the final one is to inquire into any other matter connected with the intended purchase and supply of Sputnik 5 vaccine in the agreement between the government of the Republic of Ghana, the private office of H.H. Sheikh Al Maktoum, and SL Global. So those were the terms of reference. And we just detail for you what the findings were. Stay with me, because the minister on that day this came to the floor and was adopted and approved, gave this very, very short reaction to it when my colleague Parker Wilson chased him down.
Filing a motion of censure against you. What do you say to this?
I'm not aware of it.
You're not aware of the motion?
Yes.
So, but are you perturbed? Do you feel you could be?
Yes. Perturbed of what? What is my crime? That is why I said I don't want to talk to any journalist now. I will get too emotional over unnecessary bickerings and arguments. There was a committee. The committee's report has been adopted by the chamber, and I want to end there. Please.
But do you feel that you could be dismissed by the president because of this?
Let me bring in Kwame Sapansedu. Kwame Sapansedu, I remember speaking to you on this when it first broke. We've come full circle. Last week, Thursday, I think, Parliament finally adopted that report and approved it. You just heard the minister there. He still maintains what is his crime, did nothing wrong. You've heard the ranking on that committee. What do you stand on what should happen now? The minister says we've done. Let's leave it. Let's go.
Well, thanks, Evans. I find a lot of things interesting. I remember, yes, I spoke to you, and I remember you asked me at that point when it first broke that should the minister be sacked or should he resign? And I said, I'll sit on the fence and wait for the report to come in. I clearly remember the conversation. And now the report is in, both at the committee level and on the floor. It's been adopted by consensus. From what we're being told, as I've listened, the committee was a fact-finding one. The question I sit here asking myself is, now that the facts are bare and we've all seen it, do we live in a country where there are no consequences for people's actions? Because I listened to the minister just now, and he said he would get emotional. I think we're going past the point of mitigation. Any mitigation he had, emotional or not, should have been presented to the committee. Now the findings are out, and I believe there must be consequences for people's actions. Because I don't think Ghana's laws are advice. Ghana's laws are for implementation. And if a committee finds has adverse findings against someone, there should be some punitive measures. The punitive measures lie in the bosom of the appointing authority. But yes, the minority, as they have done, can also move to attempt to remove the minister. In your introduction, you've clearly demonstrated that it's a tall order because 184 versus 137 would be very difficult to remove the minister under those circumstances. But I worry about one thing. I worry about the minister's demeanor, because I would have thought that at this point, with adverse findings found, there'll be some form of contrition, and there will be some form of acceptance and leveling up with the general public to say, well, I felt I was doing something right, but on the balance of probabilities and based on the evidence, and with the committee's findings out, I realized that I didn't act in the best interest. And in actual fact, I could have acted in a manner which, if the money hadn't been retrieved, could have caused financial loss to the state because we didn't receive the vaccines. The other question I ask myself rhetorically, Evans, is if someone broke into your house or someone broke into multimedia and took away your microphone and got arrested and returned the microphone, do you then say that, oh, the microphone has been returned and maybe he would repair the glass and windows that he broke through and therefore he's forgiven? Is that the sort of legal framework we want to run as a country? And what does it send across to the general public? Is that the way we want people put into public office to act? I believe that is not the case. So if this has happened, then I think that if he's not showing contrition, then he doesn't get the full gravity of what happened, the mistakes that were made, and any mitigation that must come thereof. And that worries me a lot.
I mean, let me bring in Mary. Mary, isn't the challenge really that this was only a fact-finding committee? Because they were set up to find fact. They have found the facts. But the terms of reference incapacitate them from making any other consequential recommendations about what should happen to the officer or officers found to have breached regulations. And so once they found what they found, it should end there. That's what the minister is actually arguing in that sound we just played.
Thank you, Evans. I believe that would be very unfortunate if we are ending there, taking it from where you ended your question. However, there is a purpose for everything. And I believe in our case, in dealing with the emergency situations and the various breaches that had been alleged at the time, there was a need to at least verify some of this, and the fact-finding committee was instituted in Parliament for that purpose. Again, this country has a system of checks and balances for a reason. And so we know that for a fact that Parliament has gone about their duty of identifying and looking at what exactly it is that happened and where did we go wrong. They have made their recommendations, and it is the duty of the appointing authority at this level to then quickly look at the evidence that has been accepted by the House on consensus to determine if the minister, who from his countenance in that interview shows that he feels no remorse, he feels he has done nothing wrong as he has indicated, deserves to still be or occupy the office in which he is. We spoke extensively to this issue of accountability in the past, that when people are given office, when people are given a mandate, it is to serve the people of this country and to ensure the highest quality of the delivery of the goods they are supposed to be delivering to us. From the findings, we are all told that serious breaches were made by the minister in procurement, which he decided he didn't pay for. It was found that some payments were made. It was also found that he breached the Procurement Act when he didn't go for any approvals. Is that what we want to set as an example for other leaders who will take over to want to do? Is that the country we want to live for our children and our children's children? Are we saying that we make the laws and some people are above them and can just do what they want and get away with it? For Parliament, I believe that the fact-finding committee has done its best, and then we now want to see what happens with the appointing authority, because we know the backstops with the appointing authority. In this democracy, we have decided to embark on as a people.
I mean, Mary and Doc, stay with me, but Afenya Maki makes the point. You say, from the minority side, you're not stopping at the recommendations, or you're not stopping at the fact-finding committee's report. And he points to the fact that one of your most fundamental recommendations, that the money should be recovered, has happened. And he actually says that at the committee level, you were shown evidence of actual refund of the money. You actually verified it. So what, again, do you want, are you seeking, other than, he says, scoring political points?
I believe that this your question is even mute by the submission of my friend, I mean, the gentleman.
Yeah, Dr. Kwame.
He asked a simple question. Somebody broke into your room, took some items. I mean, he has stolen your items. You go after the person returns it, and you tell me that because the person has returned those things, he must go scot-free. Is that the case? Is that the point?
But at least, are you confirming that you verified that the money has been refunded?
Well, I don't remember. I remember very well that they came back telling us that they have retrieved the money. But I don't remember, I mean, them showing us any document to that effect. But you see, whether they have returned the money or not, the substantive issue is, did we pay money for things that we had not taken delivery of, causing financial loss to the state? Did we buy?
But also financial loss because you've recovered the money.
Go and check the law. Even the intent to cause financial loss to the state is even a crime enough. Go and check the law. So the fact that you have refunded the money doesn't, I mean, absolve you from committing that offense. Okay? That's one. You see, you can't build anything on nothing. We have established these facts. This is a report of Parliament. It is the basis for any prosecution. So any individual can pick this report and go to court. Parliament can also invoke Article 82, the special prosecutor can also pick this report and run with it. In fact, there are similar breaches that people are standing trials in our courts. And the one who quickly comes into mind is Honorable Collins Dowda. He is in court today because he was supposed to come back to Parliament for a transaction, and he didn't come to Parliament. That's why he's in court. You know, so up till now, my problem is that the president is behaving as though he hasn't heard anything, he hasn't seen anything. And you remember, at the point in time, he was even joking and making mockery of us in the minister's region. You remember?
The minister went on leave.
Exactly. So it tells us, because when we're doing all these things, we thought that the president didn't have enough information to be able to take that action. But after all this, after going through all these processes, when it has been established and agreed by consensus by the whole House that we should adopt the content of the report, and then the president goes to stand in the region of the said minister and is making mockery of us.
He did that before the Parliament adopted it.
No, before Parliament adopted it, we just adopted the report. But it was ongoing. We sat in public and people followed everything.
But his comments, I'm just factually, his comments came before.
So we thought that the president would have done the needful even by now.
So that's why you're activating the...
Exactly. So it is not as though there are no consequences. It is because of situations such as this. That is why the drafters of the Constitution, or the makers of the Constitution, anticipated Article 82. Okay? So we are invoking Article 82 at this point to compel the president to sack him, or he must resign himself. And don't forget, it doesn't even end there. Anybody, any individual, any Ghanaian can decide to pick this report and run with it.
I'll come to what else can happen. But on the vote of censure, this is an exercise in futility, is it not? Because you need 2/3 of the House, and you don't have 2/3. You have 137.
Evans, this is too simplistic.
But it's as simple as it gets.
It isn't. This is secret ballot. Don't forget that we had and we still have 137.
Yes.
And we needed more than 137 to elect the speaker.
No, but the margin you need now, you need more than 60.
You are now talking about margins.
Yes. But in this case,
I am telling you that
it's 184.
Look, don't be surprised. This parliament is full of surprises. So don't conclude hastily that it cannot happen. Let us start the process.
You need more than 60.
Let us start the process.
MPs to vote for you.
Let us start the process, and then when we get there, when we get to the bridge, we'll cross. Of course, if we have been able to accept the content of the report both at the committee and the plenary by consensus,
yeah,
why wouldn't anybody want
but
to
you say that,
against?
but the chairman of that committee, who happens to be the deputy leader of the majority, has clearly articulated his vehement disagreement with you.
He has one vote. He has one vote.
It does. But he was a chair, and you could. The assumption is that he's representing.
I don't get the correlation.
The assumption is that his voice represents his side.
Hasten slowly, Evans. I am saying this is secret ballot. This is secret ballot. Okay,
Yeah.
You remember the appointment committee report that came out, and even members of the minority on the appointment committee, suggested or voted against some appointees at the appointment committee level. Yet when it got to the floor of the House, some of them recorded more than the majority.
I'm just pointing out, you need 60 MPP.
I am saying don't be surprised. And of course, Ghanaians, because you see, Evans, as you walk in the streets of Ghana, anybody sees you and says, Honorable, is that all? What is the consequences of what the minister did? So the minister is still at post? These are the questions. So we need to get to the logical conclusion of this matter. My conscience will be clear, and Ghanaians will know what we have done if at the end of the day we travel the full length, and then we all get to know the results. But I'm clear in my mind that we can get the numbers.
You asked the question that anybody else, because of course, as I said, the possibility of you losing is more probable than it's not because of the numbers. But you make the point that even the special prosecutor can also take this out.
Yes.
That's an avenue so open up to you to use that and
so
file a
you
proper
exploit
complaint.
all. We are not leaving any. We have an opportunity in the Constitution. We make good use of it.
So that's your first step, the Constitution.
That's our first
You're
step.
saying that you are not ruling out filing a proper complaint with the special prosecutor.
We are not ruling out anything. We are not. Evans, I've told you people are in court because they didn't come to Parliament to seek approval of international transactions.
So you're saying that if you lose this, they are not ended yet?
We are not going to relax at all. We are not. We will travel the full haul of it. And Evans, I mean, don't take it for a joke. Don't take it for a joke. In fact, by now, the special prosecutor himself should have been looking for this report. He should have been looking for this report.
It's a parliamentary report.
Yes, and it's for public consumption.
It is?
It is out there.
I mean, getting it, even for us, getting it was
Why
we
should
have
it
to
be?
use, you know. So
Why should it be? It is, I mean,
so you
reports of this nature, we even furnish all the, I mean, media guys in the
You can do
chamber
this, assuming the special prosecutor, let's assume he hasn't heard it. You can do him a favor and give it to him tomorrow.
First and first, we have the same, I mean, I'm one of the people who have signed for the censure. So I have signed for the censure. I mean, one of our leaders is leading that particular motion. And then we'll have to travel the full haul of that particular avenue.
Let me bring in...
from there, we'll take it one.
Dr. Mr. Pasedu, do you support this vote of censure? Do you think it's an appropriate method of exacting accountability? There's also the suggestion now that the special prosecutor should take a keen interest in this matter as well. Is that necessary?
I'll go back to the analogy I made about someone breaking into your house. If the person breaks into your house and gets arrested by the police, and it's not acceptable that they return your microphone, so the police should let them go, then what does it do? The police would have to investigate the circumstances, and after the circumstances, they would have to then go to the Attorney General's office to see whether there's enough evidence to put the person before a court, because the criminal barrier is high. If the criminal barrier is high and they cannot get there, they can decide to go through a civil process, which is allowed as well, because the person broke into your house, so you can sue them for damaging your property. So what I'm trying to say is that the censure process is there for the parliamentarians. The special prosecutor is there for protecting the state. All these things, if the evidence, the ingredients for the bars to be met are there, they can be exercised. I don't see why they cannot be exercised. And for me, I see where you're coming from, Evans. I see that for all intents and purposes, it's likely that the 184 might not be reached. But the truth of the matter is, we've seen in this parliament that the majority are not able to get their numbers in on a regular basis. So even if that is not reached, and there's even a simple majority, the embarrassment of losing in a parliament in which you are the executive, for me, is of concern, because that means that you lack the moral high ground to continue going to them, because on a move, they have told you, even though not with the numbers to get you out, that you haven't acted for. And that is something, as a political watcher, I'd be interested in.
I mean, Mariada, should the special prosecutor be interested in this?
I am very sure this is an issue he would want to investigate. Of course, there are serious breaches which, as the Honorable Akando mentioned, others are currently in court for, and others have been in court in the past over as well. And today we have a special prosecutor who has a mandate to investigate corruption and corruption-related offenses. And some of the breaches that are cited are within his purview, particularly when it comes to the area of the procurement, when we hear of inflated costs and others. So it is within his mandate to pick the report and look into it, identify further and better particulars if there are, and then also make a determination. That is one that he can do. The Shrine as well is available to do same. And I would want to say that the area I would want to see that we work on is the fact that there should be a bipartisan thing around this. When it is seen as the opposition leading, then it becomes difficult, because this censure thing that is currently ongoing, we need a 2/3 to work around. If there is consensus in Parliament that there were breaches and the recommendations are accepted, then we would want to see Parliament carrying on and supporting the minority in this case, and then leave the entrenched positions they usually would carry when they are discussing issues around this partisan nature. I would also want to say that this is a position we've taken it before civil society. We have spoken to it extensively, that the president who appoints the minister of state must act. Even though the president had occasion to ridicule and make fun of some of the advocacy points we raised in the past, we believe that this report that has been agreed on consensus by parliamentarians should be of concern to him, and particularly the demeanor of the minister, carrying on as if nothing was done. He did not do anything against the state, and he just went about his duty as it should be worrying for all of us, because we do not want a country where people who have been given power and authority go contrary to our laws and then get away with them. And I believe our president, who is an advocate of the rule of law, would want to sit back and watch such happen.
I mean, Dr. Kwamsa Pwansidu, let's introduce now the context surrounding the purchase of the Sputnik V. The minister have always maintained, and you work in this field, you've really studied the vaccine politics around the world. He says all these findings that have been made, it was within an emergency health situation. He was desperate to save lives, and so I'm saving lives. Why should you hold me to these high procurement standards? Why do I need cabinet approval? Why do I have to go through Parliament? Why do I have to subject myself to the processes that will only introduce bureaucracy when I need vaccines to save Ghanaian lives? Isn't that at least a mitigating factor in this that we may be ignoring?
No, there isn't a mitigating factor, and I'll tell you why. At the height of the vaccine constraint dynamics, the WHO came out and was clear that these medicines had emergency use authorizations, and you don't have to use a middleman. And there were reasons. There are pharmaceutical reasons, there are pharmacovigilance reasons. For example, if you are using a vaccine or a new medicine, that's what we call the black triangle regimen around it, which then means that you have to collect a lot of data around its interaction with the human beings, any side effects, any, serious adverse drug reactions and all that. And those have to be put at the doorstep of the manufacturer, or what we call the market authorization holder. The middleman would always absorb themselves of this responsibility, which means if you use them, you put the Ghanaian at increased risk in the pandemic to start with. So if you remember, even from a pharmaceutical movement of drugs in international commerce standpoint, I had said using the middleman was a no-no. Even before it became apparent that we had done it, I'd had a number of conversations and had been straight to say that using a middleman based on the guidance of the movement of drugs in international commerce was a no-no. That's one thing. The second thing is, do you sidestep regulation in an emergency? Even in times of war, there are treaties that guide the handling of prisoners of war. And that is why laws are made for a purpose. Likewise, that's why there are WHO guidance on the movement of medicines from country to country, and even under emergency use authorizations. So I get gravely concerned when a minister is flouting all of these and saying it's an emergency. What next would we do? Next time there's an emergency, so if someone comes to tell us that, let's say that there has been a massive flood, and therefore they just gave a contract to an international organization to come and dredge all the rivers that were leading to the floods and clear the floodplains because people were dying and getting drowned, and they don't go to parliament, and then we just say, yes, we saw people dying, so it should be allowed. Heavens, we cannot do that. We cannot run an ad hoc country. That's why we have a constitution. And I'm not sure that anyone would tell me that the framers of our constitution didn't realize that the word emergency existed in the dictionary, and they didn't know the ingredients that went to make something an emergency. They sure did. But they still put these checks and balances in place because they know we are human, and human as we are subject to abuses. Clearly, these breaches demonstrate that the abuses have happened even when the regulations are there. I don't think the word emergency should be used to excuse them.
I mean, you must certainly have sympathy for him at some point.
Evans.
You don't all have sympathy in the context of a pandemic that everybody was struggling with, Ghana was dealing with for the first time. There are peculiar circumstances there.
Even just like my brother has stated, you don't go to buy vaccines just like you are going to the market to buy pepper. Vaccines are very sensitive, and the security of every vaccine is very crucial. That is why it is not allowed. And as a country, check our history. We've never bought vaccines from any private individual. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, what you must know is that these processes didn't occur in a day. It took some time. Number three, we have laws taking care of these situations. For example, in Parliament, I remember the first facility from the World Bank that came, the $1 billion World Bank facility that came. We sat on it and dealt with it within 1 day because it was an emergency. Certificates of urgency. So the minister could have come to Parliament and indicated that this is an emergency situation, so deal with it for me, and we could have done so. He has absolutely no excuse. He cannot hide under anything. Okay? So he is a member of Parliament. He is a member of Parliament. You see, there's a provision in the Public Procurement Act that deals with sole sourcing, situations like this. And that sole sourcing, the provision that is dealing with sole sourcing, clearly states that you must write for the prior approval from the Public Procurement Board or Authority Board. So there are laws dealing with such situations. Okay, so you can't just come and say it was under emergency, so you do whatever it is. Look, such a sensitive decision that has financial implications to the state. You can't just be in your office and take such decisions on behalf of Ghana without even consulting the president, if that is true, because that is what he said before us.
I mean, as we wrap up, the vote of censure that you filed, the Constitution says it has to be debated, I think, within 14 days, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 14 days.
So really, the Speaker has no choice in the matter because you've made the constitutional threshold for it to happen. So you expect the debate on the 4th. Do you know when that is exactly, the 14th day?
Well,
next 2 weeks?
Let's give ourselves about 2 weeks. Yeah, okay. 2 weeks, and then we will start a debate. We will make our...
The minister, the Constitution gives the minister
the opportunity
the right to be heard.
Yes.
It has to come to the floor.
Yes, on the floor to be heard. And probably unfortunately for him at this point, no lawyer will have audience on the floor of the House.
So only himself?
Yes. And he's a member of Parliament, he's a minister, so he's entitled to be on the floor to be heard.
And then after that, the vote will be taken?
Yeah.
And you expect this to be secret ballot, and you expect to win?
It's not as if I expect it to be
no problem.
Whether you are removing somebody or you are putting somebody in office, and the law says that, or some other says that, it must be
no problem. And you expect to win?
I'm very confident.
Okay.
Because I believe that my colleagues in the majority also believe that there should be proper accountability if somebody is given the opportunity to serve this country.
And you say, again, that you have absolutely no sympathy for the minister.
Oh, he hasn't gotten sympathy for himself.
No, he just said that if he starts talking about it, he'll be emotional. I mean, that tells you
Look at the way and the demeanor, the way he was talking, that he has not even seen what he has done wrong.
Okay.
He himself has not seen what he has done wrong. You expect me to see what he has done wrong to have sympathy for him? Okay. He himself.
I mean, I thank you, gentlemen. Let's listen again to the minister as we close the chapter on this. This is his reaction to us when we tracked him down. We'll meet again tomorrow for another edition of PM Express.
Filing a motion of censure against you. What do you say?
I'm not aware of it.
You're not aware of the motion?
Yes.
So, but are you perturbed? Do you feel you could be?
Yes. Perturbed of what? What is my crime? That is why I said I don't want to talk to any journalist now. I will get too emotional over unnecessary bickerings and arguments. There was a committee. The committee's report has been adopted by the chamber, and I want to end there. Please.
But do you feel that you could be dismissed by the president because of this?